two years ago, if not for a take foul, Kawhi Leonard, it might be leading them to the NBA Finals in Milwaukee. So there's a lot of a chance here, and I think that especially Clippers fans know that there's always something lurking around the corner that's going against their favor. It seems like just the history of this franchise and the way that the postseason has never turned out the way they want to.
Looking at that 12-9 start as of the recording of this podcast, you could also spin this pretty positive in not having your number one player, that they are sitting fifth in the West right now. Who have you noticed standing out in these first 21 games, first quarter or so of this season? Who has kind of surprised you or stepped up to fill the void that's been left there?
I think that almost to a man, everyone on the team has gone through some sort of roller coaster ride to start this year, where the play has been up and down, the efficiency up, the effectiveness. One of the players who really has been steady throughout is Ivica Zubac. And at the time of a recording, he's coming off a 31-point, 29 rebound, 3-block game. The last person to do that was Kareem. So that was sort of the exclamation point on what has been a season that even a week ago, when I was asking his teammates, what are you seeing from Zoo that's allowed this to happen? And they all sort of said, well, think about it. He played in EuroBasket and was playing in late August and early September. So by the time training camp officially opened, he was in fighting shape right then and there. And Nicolas Batum, who's played internationally with France for years, said that was always the secret to his success, to coming into each year feeling ready to go right from the start, because he'd invariably be coming off of an international trip with France. He saw the exact same thing happening with Zubac. There's also just a lot of confidence. Now he's playing 30 minutes a night. Under Doc Rivers, he was rarely playing fourth quarter minutes. Those were always kind of given out to Montrezl Harrell. That's who Doc clearly trusted in those settings. With Ty Lue, it's been Zoo in his fourth quarter, especially the last two years. That's been a time when, unless they're going small, it's really Zubac's time. There's not like another backup center who's taking that role. I thought Luke Kennard also had been really sharp. I thought it was not only the three-point shooting, which we talked about earlier, but he'd been a guy who I think has been really earning a lot of praise and trust from teammates for taking the challenge defensively on other teams' best players. I think that he's also become a little bit better of a playmaker. There were a lot of high hopes for him when he left Detroit to be a playmaker, but we saw that a lot too when they have small pick and rolls. He gets a short roll and fire to somebody else. He was also just much more aggressive, I felt, this year. And I sort of asked him about it, like driving to the basket. It just seemed like he was doing that more often. He was like, I don't, it's funny you say that, because I don't feel like that was a point of emphasis. That's what he would say about himself, but it seemed to be the case where he just was getting his nose in that lane a lot more often, and it usually led to good things. And then really one of the last guys I like to highlight is probably the last 10 games has been Terrence Mann. He was a guy who, because he started the year and he really didn't know what role he was playing, it was confusing. He's said as much that he was confused about where he needed to make the most impact. Because now he's essentially can play 5 positions. They're asking him to play everything from a really, really small center to ball handler. And so, you're just sort of, where do I fit here? When you can fit everywhere, you sort of fit nowhere. And he's been that valuable of a guy. But he's really settled in. I think that ever since Robert Covington unfortunately had COVID and was knocked out, that gave Mann more minutes, and he really had a resurgence to the point now that Robert Covington really is out of the rotation most nights when they're at full strength. So I think we're getting back to seeing Terrence Mann being that sort of like, when he's at his best, it's like a whirling dervish. Something good is going to happen. He's just always moving. There's a lot of energy, and that's kind of the best version of Terrence Mann, and we're seeing that again.
Yeah, it's fascinating because you could see the situation with the injury bug and these guys stepping up. I mean, this could build a lot of camaraderie and chemistry. And at the same time, of course, the question mark is fitting your star players back into this current rhythm that they have. One more question, and then Justin, I'll turn it over to you for your question. How has the fit been with John Wall so far this year, and his presence in that locker room and on the court. How is he doing blending in with this team and complementing the rest of this roster?
Yeah, it's been an adjustment for him, to be first of all playing off the bench, which is something he
Yeah.
really never did before. Playing limited minutes and not playing back to backs, even though he said he's fully healthy. I know that has been frustrating for him, which he's talked about. Good for him in full candor. He's talked about that several times about how he wants to be playing all the time, and I think a lot of that it has to be rooted in the fact that he was out of the league for all intents and purposes last year when he and Houston
Yeah.
had that mutual decision to have him basically train in Miami away from the young guns in Houston as that kind of rebuild was happening. So I think that he's incredibly grateful to be back, and nobody wants to sort of fit in better than he does. I mean, at Summer League, he talked about how he was looking forward to not having to be Batman, as he put it. He didn't want to have to be Batman anymore. He could be the complementary piece and let Kawhi and PG take over. That really hasn't happened a whole lot just because those minutes haven't happened a whole lot so far. But I think that on court, it seems to be most nights there's a boom or bust element. When he's at his best, he does something the Clippers do not have. He is full speed. People wondered about his age, his giddy up, his injury history. Could he be that full speed guy to get 94 feet in the snap of a finger? He is that guy again. He had a 15 assist night when he had 9 in his first 6 minutes. I mean, when he's impressive, he is really impressive. I think the thing for him is that passing and not taking the first easy shot and making sure that the ball is moving. I think that sometimes teams are giving him the long mid-range shot and he wants to step into it and take it. The numbers would show you that he's just not a great three-point shooter or long mid-range shooter this year. So I think shot selection is something that even Ty Lue 2 weeks ago or so in San Antonio mentioned that that could be a little bit better. But where his head is at in terms of wanting to make to distribute the ball, I think that is I've been a plus. Everyone's pleasantly surprised with how physically he looks as good as they had hoped. I think that for him, does it always have to be the home run play? No, and that's maybe where the next step is for this team fitting in with the unit with Norman Powell, maybe Terrence Mann. Moving that ball around one extra pass at times can be a real key. But I think that overall, if you were to ask the Clippers, on July 3rd, what are your hopes for John Wall the first quarter of the year? I think this version of him would be more than they even bargained for.
Andrew, I want to follow up on something you mentioned earlier, and that was about EuroBasket, just with Zubac. He participated in that. Luca has, Lauri Markkanen. Is a trend that you might see from other European players, just knowing the fast starts they've gotten out to, and maybe even seeing some, American players maybe follow suit within just, different pro-am leagues, in the summertime. I know we've seen one-offs, for instance, but just due to the success of these, international players, do you think that might be a trend you might be seeing in the coming years in the league?
Well, I think so. I also think there's a double-edged sword to it, which is, obviously the minutes.
Sure.
Ty Lewis said that it no doubt brought Ivica Zubac into rhythm, but they also have to be smart about minutes played. Now, I'm sure Zubac would say, trust me, just play me all the minutes you want. It doesn't matter. He's only 25 years old. His motor can go. But I think there is a wear and tear element to it that probably scares some teams off. Is it just a blank check, a rubber stamp, I should say, to go over there and play? No, I'm sure there's reservations that team have about injury possibilities. And I think those are well warranted. At the same time, you're seeing benefits from Zubac right now and Markkanen, to your point, just what it looks like when a guy can really come with a lot of confidence. One thing Nicholas Batum brought up, because you mentioned the American side of things, he said, these are games with real stakes and real pressure, and it's not pickup.
That's
And it's not, it's not even high level pro-am that we see across, the U.S. in the summertime, especially this last summer when it felt like whether it's the Drew League or the crossover in Seattle, there were a lot of high profile names playing summer ball in leagues we hadn't seen in several years. Those games are extremely competitive. I don't think that there's any reason to doubt that. But as Nicholas Batum said, it's just a little different when you have your home country uniform on, and is a real cup at the end of it. And so I think that's a nuanced part of the international competition, whether it's Olympics or the World Cup or EuroBasket. That's a part of it that I think is important. At least that Nicholas Batum felt was important. That these are games that matter.
Andrew, I want to shift gears and ask you about ClipperVision. It really fascinated me when this was released. I know Steve Ballmer is really excited about this. Just seeing some of the clips online, I think it's something that has potential to really, transform the league, just depending on how it works with all the regional networks and working all those contracts out. What has been just the feedback from the fans just of the new platform so far? I know we're fairly early into the season, but from what you have gathered, are fans excited about this? Are they interested in using this platform compared to NBA League Pass?
I think that the general feedback has been that the kind of financial side of it, where you don't have to be have a cable subscription, you can just purchase through that, has been a home run. Early on, there was sort of some technical difficulties I could tell fans were having, some frustrations about sort of just logging in, like just real small stuff, like not small stuff, but kind of version 1.0, things like that I think fans were grappling with. I'm not sure how they feel now, sort of if those kinks have been worked out, but the idea that you just don't have to have league pass if you don't want, you don't have to have a cable package, you can just buy Clippers games, is probably the thing that will, if this succeeds, will be its biggest legacy. I will be curious if other regional sports networks want to do something like this with the team. I asked Steve Ballmer if he envisioned a future when teams would just take all of their rights and put it on their own, like pay-per-view, like their own, Nuggets Vision or Blazer Vision. Well, there actually was a Blazer Vision about 20 years ago, but one of the, like a similar thing where you don't watch your team on your RSN, you watch it only through the team's direct app. And he said that he could potentially see that, but they didn't go that route because they wanted to make sure their exposure was fairly broad. And if without fans really knowing anything about this, to do that all this year in year one of ClipperVision, their audience probably would have shrunk quite a bit, because people just don't know what ClipperVision is. So I think it would take a bold team to sort of say, okay, all of our rights now, unless we have a national TV game, you can just come directly to us. I think that day is coming. I don't know about how soon, because I know that you just have to have some exposure about what this is. But the other thing is, if you want to have this hybrid model where you have some games on your RSN, but also have this ClipperVision, those contracts are really hard to work out, because obviously you're taking some stuff away from the RSN. And so I know that took up until the last, there were about 2 weeks to go before the season began, or maybe 3, before it was wrapped up with the Clippers. And that was something that had been being negotiated for months and months. So that's a tricky thing. I don't know how many teams will want to go through that. And I don't know how many teams will want to directly take all of their games and just stuff them onto their own app. But it is sort of, I think the model of sports viewership is, you just buy what you want, and you don't have to buy the 180 other channels.
One last question for me. Do you know, did Ballmer discuss the potential revenue stream from this in terms of just the, another source of, money coming in for the team, in terms of, fans actually being excited? Because I know I live in Denver, and I know there's been a lot of frustration with just, different Nuggets games and with Comcast and everything going on here. So do you see a time where fans will be actually demanding this? Because I can see, I'm not a Nuggets fan, but if I was, I can see this would be the perfect situation. Just forget the RSN. I'll just pay for my team. I don't have to worry about anything else.
Yeah, I think Nuggets fans are like the longest suffering fans, because they just can't watch their team.
Yeah.
Except in limited instances. So I do know that they wanted to, they wanted a pretty good subscriber base. Ballmer had certain goals. They wouldn't say what that is, of course, but they do look at that. This isn't just an act of charity of, look how we're helping you, fan. They want to make, have this become a profitable product for them, for sure. I don't know what those numbers look like right now, or what the goal was, or how close they are to meeting them. But this was, this something like this has to be part of the long play for them. So I don't know that even year one, we're going to feel like we have a true gauge for how successful it was. I'll be curious in how long the Clippers stick with this model, though. Do they, and because they signed an extension with their RSN, but there might be some outs within that potentially. Would they, if they felt happy enough with it, would they just get an out and take everything they have? I guess we'll see.